Que lo que mi gente, welcome to the Monoplaza F1 podcast. As always, I'm your host, Emi Bertre. And for the first time ever, we have a guest on the show, the one and only Didier Brival. He is quite possibly the biggest F1 fan I know and has tried to get me into the sport for a long time. Didier, how's it going?
I'm all right, man. I'm excited to talk about F1. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm happy that we were finally able to get our schedules together to make this happen.
Nice. Hey, first and foremost, apologies for not listening to you in college when it came to F1. It's better late than never.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. So let's get into it. Australian Grand Prix. So before I deep dive into it, let me get your general impression on that race. How did you stay up to watch it? Let me start there. Did you stay up to watch it or did you watch a recording?
I swore I wasn't gonna watch it. Right? I was like, nah. The night races always hurt my feelings.
Sure.
I am a devoted Ferrari fan. However, I've been watching the sport for so long that I can appreciate when other teams do well and watch the midfield battles and stuff like that. So I was like, does Carlos really have a chance? And I saw some posts on Instagram saying like the Ferrari's race pace is really good, and I was like, yeah, I've heard that before, especially this season. And it turned out that Ferrari's pace wasn't that great during the race, and so I was like, whatever, I'll watch it. And on lap when Carlos got Max, I was like, well, we literally saw this last year
Been there.
at
Yep. Been
this
there, done
race.
that. Yep.
Been there, done that. And then when I saw the wisps of smoke before Alex Jackson, I was watching the F1 TV coverage. I saw it
Right.
before he saw it, and I started screaming. I started yelling because this is not very common nowadays in F1. But back in the late 90s, early 2000s, engines blew up all the time. And
Yep.
the smoke was identical to that, but I could tell that it wasn't coming from the right spot. So I started screaming, and I woke up my 5-year-old son who was fast asleep. I started screaming, and that was that. It was one of the best races for me in a very long time.
And so that's actually a good segue into it. Was it a good race because Max Verstappen didn't win, or or or, or was it a good race
Oh my
because it was
gosh.
good racing? So I got to differentiate right now, right? Because you
Yeah,
saw
no, that's
if
a
you're
very
watching the
good point.
if you're watching the live broadcast, you saw everybody lose their freaking mind. They were
Yeah,
cheering when they announced it over the loudspeakers. Oh
yeah,
no, Max Verstappen DNF, and I don't know
yeah.
if people were cheering. Yeah, obviously they were cheering
Let me
because he
tell you
DNF.
something. Let me tell you something. When Carlos came around the last corner on the opening lap, on the second lap when he passed him, you could hear the fans cheering louder than the cars. That doesn't happen very often. Okay, it happens in Monza a lot when Ferrari's doing well, but that's
Sure.
about it, really. And when you can hear the fans over the cars, it was special. I will say, I savored more that Max didn't win than that
Oh
Ferrari won,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because I don't believe I believe in Red Bull more than I believe in Ferrari's ability to go fast this season. And so that
Sure.
was, yeah, it was more because Max was not going to win the race than Ferrari won the race.
Yeah, no, that's valid, right? Because in the last going back to 2022, like literally
When
last
was
time
it?
Max DNF was in Australia in
2022.
2022, right? And he
Yeah,
started that season first two races, and that one felt a
he
little bit
DNF'd
different, right?
both.
Because you didn't quite know Ferrari was doing really well. You're like, oh, here we go. Obviously, 2022 ended differently, and 2023 was just a real
Oh my,
barn burner of a season. So yeah, no, I'm
yeah,
with you. Like when I saw the wisp of smoke, first I got excited when Carlos passed him. I was like, okay.
yeah.
But I've seen people pass him, like you said last year. Then I didn't notice it when you noticed it. I noticed it when they go to Max's onboard because somebody said something, and all of a sudden I was like, is he out? And then I start seeing him like drop down in the order. I was like, is he out? And then when he was finally out, admittedly, here's the thing. I stayed up and I watched it live because I
Yeah.
hate watching recorded sporting events because people always ruin it for me. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, when he was out, I just kind of perked up on the couch. I grabbed
Yeah.
my peanut butter cookies and I was like, okay, it's a race. I got other stuff to think about. And so
Eso.
I guess my question back to you is like, is it is it good for the sport that people ultimately are cheering for Max not winning
Yeah.
rather than like, hey, Carlos Sainz 16 days removed from getting his appendix, or 16 days from getting his appendix removed, had the pace, is leading, and it looks like
Yeah.
he can maintain that lead, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Because it feels like now everybody's just like, who won, right? And you've seen the memes. We've shared some memes back and forth about like, yeah, don't worry about Max season first. It's really, which by the way, I think it's bullcrap. Like, I hate that like the best of the rest conversation, or
Yeah.
if Max Verstappen
Yeah.
and Red Bull wasn't there. So I guess is it good that people, and you've been a fan longer than I have, right?
Mm-hmm.
And obviously there's a ton of new fans, the DTS generation that maybe is not used to the metros, whatever word that Wolf uses to talk about there's gaps where people just dominate.
Yeah. Um, I don't think that. I think it's a symptom of the health of the sport. Unfortunately, to its detriment, that
Mm.
everybody perks up when Max is not going to win a race.
Yep.
Because ideally, you would want to have, if Max won 12 races a season and still won the championship, no qualms, no qualms. I could not argue.
Yeah.
I couldn't say that the season wasn't that interesting. I could say, well, there was a narrative of competition. My team tried and didn't win, but that's life, you know. But the annihilation that Max has had, the grip he's had on F1 since 2022, really, since the third race of 2022. And the crazy thing was, for for better or worse, Ferrari has a part to play in that. Mercedes also has a part to play in that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
McLaren want
mm-hmm.
to think they have a part to play in that, but not really.
No
So
disrespect.
yeah, no disrespect, but like that, the narrative that you guys have been in the fight is a very new thing. And so with Ferrari and Mercedes, it's just as much of Red Bull's grip on F1 as to Ferrari, but more Mercedes's mediocrity in the
Oh
last,
yeah,
two,
three,
almost two
three.
seasons, three
I'm
seasons
calling
now.
it three. Yeah, I'm calling it
Yeah.
three.
And so I don't think it's healthy for the sport, but if we were looking for who to blame, I can't blame Red Bull. I can't say, hey, Adrian Newey, you built a car that was just too good. I have to look at the other teams who have championship pedigree and say, where have you been? So,
Yeah. No, no, no. So I actually, I'm with you on that. In that I've always said, if you are mad that Red Bull is winning, then just do something about it, right? Like we got the same rules, and now we got the cost cap, which, even though whatever, I'm not going to go into all of that stuff.
yeah,
Technically, have similar budgets, right?
depending
Obviously, the
on your
staff is different.
results, yeah.
Yeah, and so for me, it's like just beat them. And I mean, obviously not as easy, but yeah, everybody's finding ways to get around the rules. So I guess going back to the race, obviously we are both on the same page. Super excited that hey, it was not Red Bull. We will not have to listen to the national anthem of the Netherlands or the Austrian national anthem. Which,
Yeah.
by the way, I will say, like, and it's a good segue. Like, shouts out. A lot of people don't know this. I'm going to nerd about this. I think you actually are one of the few that knows this. It was nice listening to the Spanish national anthem, but it is always going to be a track because they don't have lyrics for their
Yeah.
national anthem. So
Not
whatever
none of them. Yeah.
the spirit moves you to make up lyrics and all the way to
Yeah,
no
exactly.
disrespect to my Spanish. um, but it was also nice hearing, Fratelli d'Italia, and
Yeah.
obviously you and I
Oh,
both spent some time abroad, and so I know the lyrics to that national anthem. You and I know it for different reasons. Obviously,
for
you
different
being
reasons.
lifelong or huge Ferrari
Yeah.
fan, and me just for spending some time there, and so we both know what it's like. And so Ferrari 1-2. I guess talk about the excitement of just seeing them there, because now Ferrari's 93 points in the Constructors' Championship, right?
Yeah.
4 points
Yeah.
behind Red Bull. Um, some thoughts there, but
I
really,
mean,
it's great that they got that 1-2, but more or less, like now people are questioning, and I think you're one of those. Carlos Sainz is the only driver in the last 2 years to win a race that's not in Red Bull, and we are letting him go to sign the marketing behemoth, the quote unquote statistically greatest of all
yeah,
time,
yeah.
whatever adjective you want to insert there. So I guess A, were you excited to hear the national anthem of Italy play again?
Oh
And
man.
B, did Ferrari make the right move by signing LH and letting Carlos Sainz go?
So that's a very good question. It's a very tough question to answer. The first part's very easy. The first time that I got used to hearing the Spanish anthem and then the Italian anthem was actually with Fernando Alonso with Ferrari.
Fair.
And when we signed Fernando Alonso, every inch of my being told me he is the best driver on that racetrack. We could not have hired a more talented driver when we hired him in 2010. I I remember one race, and I don't remember where it was. It may have been Malaysia, when his engineer said, "Fernando, we know you have enormous talent. Use that talent." And Fernando would do things, especially 2010 and 2012. He would do things in the car when you compare it to what Felipe Massa was his teammate, a Brazilian, when you could
Oh
see
boy.
what Felipe was doing in the car, and you could argue that Felipe was half the man he was at the time because he had a horrible accident. But anyway, I digress. When you analyze what Fernando was doing in that Ferrari compared to his teammate, it's very similar to what Max does compared to Sergio. Very similar. I mean, it's very close. And so I had no qualms about
Mm-hmm.
Fernando driving our car. I thought this gives us the best chance to take down, at the time, our main rival was Red Bull and
Right.
McLaren from time to time.
Sure.
Um, which leads me to this next situation here, and that is now. Um, I don't think we're signing the pound for pound best driver in that Formula One grid. Do I think we're signing the next best thing? Yes, because Ferrari has a pedigree of hiring world champions. And we cannot
Sure.
sign Max. And the last champion that's not Lewis or Max is Nico Rosberg, and he's not going to enter the chat anytime soon.
Yeah, he's
Um,
too busy with the rental cars.
a, right, and so the best I am of the idea. I am of the thought that we didn't have to mess up. We didn't have to fix a problem. There wasn't really a problem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
but Frederick Vasseur has an excellent relationship with Lewis Hamilton. He
Yep.
was his
GP2 days.
GP2 from his GP2 days. Um, Vasseur needed a statement signing to his era, his legacy at Ferrari, and that's what Ferrari does. They hire world champions.
Sure.
Um, do I think? I think every team has shown, every team that's been successful in F1 has shown that you cannot focus on two drivers to win a championship. The last team that did that nearly imploded with Mercedes, with the Nico Rosberg, Lewis Hamilton era. So,
Mercedes. Yes,
yeah,
let's go.
Mercedes. So I don't. I think the staple, the example of what a world championship fight looks like for a team is to have a number one driver and a number two driver. But now Ferrari has an issue. They have two number one drivers by definition. Charles was the one that was leading the charge, and I still think
Mm-hmm.
Charles is on his day faster than Carlos. He's
Yeah.
had issues this season for one reason or another,
Sure.
but I think Charles is the leader of the team. Carlos is in a tricky situation right now, as we've talked about, as is very obvious. So I
Yeah.
think we could have just stayed with Carlos and Charles, which is the same name, which is wild to me. Carlos and Charles is just
Oh yeah,
different
yeah, yeah, yeah.
translations of the exact
Different
same name.
languages. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
different languages are the same name. So I think we could have stayed with Carlos and Charles. um, but having said that,
Uh,
Lewis's his talent, his skill is unparalleled, and especially statistically speaking. And so I'm excited to see that, but I think it's a little bit of a, did we need it? I don't know. Is it
Sure.
tradition? Absolutely.
Sure. I guess I would go back, and you alluded to it, but if you go start at Fred Vassouras, by the way, I love Fred. Like he is so unserious until
Yeah.
he is not. Right. The last time
Yeah.
I saw Fred heated obviously was last year at the Vegas GP where the manhole blew
Oh,
up Carlos
boy
Sainz's
was
car and is like, if I speak,
mad.
right? So when
If
he's
I
mad,
speak.
like he's mad, but he's so unserious. He looks like a guy that would make a good French onion soup. I don't know. Anyways, and so
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
if you go to Fred, he's with Charles even back in the Sauber
Yeah.
days, right? And so
Yeah.
like this is definitely a team that he's been building. I never got the feeling that he hated Carlos, but
No.
I also never got the feeling that Carlos was his guy like Charles was his guy, right?
They both speak
And again, like
French.
I also feel like Charles on his day is faster
Yeah.
than Carlos. That being said, the one to get the wins has been Carlos. Charles has a bit of, and I love Charles. Nobody crucify me. He does. One of the other podcasts I listened to said this, and I can't shake it. Shouts out Quick Stop F1. Charles sometimes has the bozo gene where it's like you
Yeah.
are winning this race and you make
Yeah.
the dumbest mistake.
Yeah.
It makes no sense. So think back to French GP
Yeah.
in 2022, I think. He was
No.
leading it.
Yeah. That was
And
that
so
I can't
and
watch
so
the
yeah,
highlight of that
I
race.
see. I do feel like Lewis to Ferrari has been a long time coming. I think John Elkann had a vision, right? And even if it's for money purposes or because it gives him the best two drivers, I also agree you can't have two number one drivers. You do have to lean one way or the other because it's chaos, right? Like who do we give the strategy to? Who's going to race each other? Whatever. I don't I don't know if Lewis Hamilton is still in his prime. I don't think he's
He's
washed.
not.
It's just that we haven't seen him in a good car since, frankly, the W11. Because even I think
Yeah.
the W12 was not as good as the 11, right? And so if I go 12, 13, 14, and whatever is happening this year with the 15, hasn't had a good car. Total Wolf is not. I think Horner's statement about Wolf is coming true in terms of he's just a business guy who is here in the F1 world,
Yikes.
right? Now,
Yikes.
does the move make sense for Ferrari? So you take the racing aside from a monetary standpoint, you know that their stocks skyrocketed, right?
Mm-hmm.
It will be interesting to see. It looks like Lewis and Charles already get along. You see them posting stuff about each other all the time. Drivers parade, they're next to each other. Charles clearly has an admiration for Lewis. Lewis obviously has an admiration for Charles. I do feel like Charles will win a World Driver Championship at some point, but if he's going up against Lewis, how much harder is that going to be? And the car is so far 3 races in, good. And you've got next season as the final season for the ground effects regulations before you go into 2026, right?
Mm-hmm.
No one knows how long Hamilton is going to be in Ferrari, right? We just
Yeah.
know it's a lifelong dream. Now, where does that leave Carlos Sainz though, right? Like I know you've heard he's been linked to a bunch of different teams. People have said Audi because of the
Yeah.
connection his dad has, Red Bull because he
Well,
used to be a
yeah.
Red Bull driver, Aston Martin because Lawrence Stroll's pockets are deeper than the
My
sun. I don't
goodness.
even know.
My
And
goodness.
so I guess
Unreal.
like what because I do feel like Carlos Sainz has this is an obvious statement, the pedigree to be in the top teams.
Yeah.
He has nothing to prove in my mind.
I don't
So
think
like
so.
I don't
Yeah.
see him going to William Haas, but Sauber, even Sauber or Audi feels like a midfield team to me, even though they're linking him to that team. And by the way, that would probably be a Nico Hulkenberg and Carlos Sainz team up.
Yeah. I want to back up a little bit because you mentioned Lewis Hamilton's, just to put a little ending to that. Lewis Hamilton's most successful statistic in F1 is actually pole positions. I think he has
104.
more poles
104. Yep.
to race victories. Okay. Lewis Hamilton is a wonderful qualifier. Symptomatic of Lewis's decline, just whatever that may be, is that Lewis has actually struggled with qualifying these
Right.
last 2 seasons pretty much.
Yep.
2022 wasn't too bad. He had his moments, but
Sure.
2023 he had not severe, but he had issues with qualifying.
Yep.
This is indicative of, I don't know what the data will show, whether it's him or whether it's his trust in the car or if it's just the car, because there's a middle ground. There's more him, there's more the car. So both things can be right at the same time. So is he in decline? If he has a strong car, I don't think so. That
Right.
being said, Charles and Lewis have a very similar driving styles. They're more
Mm-hmm.
manipulators of the car rather than reacting to what the car is doing, which is why when the car is off, Carlos can bring home the car with a good result. Charles really has to back up, and he gets very timid. So same thing happens to Lewis. Same thing happened to Sebastian Vettel. We saw that towards the end of his Ferrari time.
Mm.
So but with Carlos is much more reactive. He's much more adaptable to the cars that he drives. He can pretty much make any car he drives go quick enough. Does
Sure.
he wring the very max out of it? I don't know. But I think, and this is just me personally, I think Carlos Sainz is the first driver to have an at perpetually upward trajectory since leaving Red Bull. Because the only drivers that have left Red Bull and continued on a positive trajectory, let's
Mm-hmm.
just name them: Pierre Gasly,
Got that one.
Alex
Yep. Sure.
Albon,
Yep. Yep. Yep.
and Sergio Perez. There's Daniel Kvyat, whose daughter now leaves races holding Max Verstappen's hand with his ex-girlfriend next to him. So does Daniel Kvyat's entire existence has been ruined. But I will
Yeah.
say,
Sorry to
like,
that, man.
sorry to that man. My gosh, Max took his girl, his
Whole family,
daughter, and his
everything.
car and his job in one fell swoop. It's wild.
Uh, shouts out to the Russian missile.
The Russian missile, the torpedo, as Sebastian Vettel told him. So what I will say is, like, I think Sainz has Gasly and Albon have survived Red Bull. I think
Mm-hmm,
Sainz
mm-hmm,
has
mm-hmm.
thrived after Red Bull, and he's the only driver that can say that's happened to. And
That's fair.
so I think if Carlos Sainz believes in a project with Audi, I
Mm-hmm.
think he spends one season in purgatory,
Of
the
course.
worst kind of purgatory.
Those pit
Um,
stops,
those
54
pit
second pit.
stops,
Yep.
that ridiculous color scheme that would make him look absolutely hideous.
Yep.
Maybe now the thing is, who do you sacrifice? Guan Yu Zhou or Zhou Guan Yu has probably the pockets to stay in F1, the marketing side of it. Valtteri Bottas is my
Nope.
heart. Like, I love that
I,
guy.
I feel you. Get
So who do you sacrifice? I have
both
no
of them.
idea.
Both of them. You sacrifice both of them. All right. You sacrifice both. I love Valtteri too. And Zoe, I honestly don't know anything about him
I
except
have
somebody
no knowledge
find
of
that
him.
man a barber to style his hair better. Anyways, no,
Yeah.
I agree with you. I would say then what I hear you saying is that Sainz is a reliable, adaptable driver, but when the car is right for Leclerc and even for Hamilton, they can do things with that Sainz on his best day cannot. Is that
Cannot, right?
fair?
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
yeah.
I think you understand that perfect. What I was trying to say perfectly.
And so then last point, I guess, about Ferrari. This is I need your biased opinion. All right. Do they have the car? Is it real? And can they bring the fight to Red Bull? So forget all the jokes about strategy that
Yeah.
everybody loves to make. They seem to have figured out their degradation. It feels like their pace is good. They've consistently, I know it's only been 3 races, qualifying pace have been there, lap pace have been within striking distance of Red Bull. Can they continue on that upward trajectory and actually give us a championship? Because whatever last year was, the fact that people were saying if you took Red Bull, I've said that already. If you took Red
Yeah.
Bull out, it would actually be an
Yeah.
interesting season. No. Red Bull is
Right.
there.
Yeah.
So can Ferrari?
Uh, yeah. So to quote one of my favorite singers, his name is Brandon Boyd, in a song by a band that he's in called Incubus. There's a song called Just a Phase. And in it he says, temporaryism has been the black plague and the Jesus of our age. And the thing is, guys, temporaryism, or recency bias, if you will.
Sure.
Um, this is very prevalent, especially with the newer generation of F1 fans.
Mm-hmm.
And we kind of gloss over the fact that stable platform cars are the ones that really win races and are very fast.
Sure.
And Sergio Perez said something that was utterly foolish after the race. He said that he didn't think that even Max could have kept up with Carlos.
See,
Um,
he's
Sergio,
yeah, viejo sabro. He's telling on
Sergio,
himself, by the way.
he's telling on himself, okay? And he's also saying some reckless stuff because he has to save face that he
Sure.
didn't win the race. Because
you're not as good as Max. Just say it, bro.
exactly,
It's all right.
just say it.
Everyone
just
knows.
say it. We know it. Like every one of his teammates, another dude left the team and has not one of the guys, and I should have mentioned him and the people who left Red Bull. Daniel Ricciardo left Red Bull for what? I was a part of the train. I was stop being them. I was there, dog. I bought the mug. One of the few F1 merchandises that I actually bought, and it was just it was a sham. So I think do we have the pace? I think we have a stable platform that we
Fair.
can build upon to get
Okay.
faster throughout the season without having to scratch our heads and be like, where do we get the pace from? Upgrades. Because now the upgrades are not covering a weakness, they're building on a baseline. And the baseline is decent. If we can stop having issues now and then in the races, especially in Charles's car, I think we could have more consistent results. Are we faster than Red Bull? Not even a little bit.
Oh man, come on now.
I don't think we're faster than Red Bull. I don't think we will get to the point where we're clearly faster than Red Bull. Not this season. But if our upgrades work the way we're hoping they should work, I think Max will not win 21 races this season.
Yeah, there's 21 left, and he's got 20. There's 20. I can't math.
There's 24 this year.
There's 21 left. Jesus, hey everybody.
So
I can't
that's
math.
all right. So I don't think Max will win as many races as he won last year if we can keep up our progress with the stable platform that we have. Championship fight, not a hope. Not a hope.
Hey, that's going to sit even better next season when Adrian Newey finds himself at Maranello. John Elkin, if you're listening, your pockets are deep. We are hungry.
Man.
So all right, I'll take your word for it. I am delusional in thinking that I feel like Ferrari can bring the fight to them because they have two strong drivers on that team versus Red Bull that has one strong driver.
I will say Charles's best quality in F1 is also one lap pace. And it's telling that Charles hasn't been able to unlock his one lap pace. And that's kind of been like my, something is interesting here. So once Charles is hitting his form, I think that's the true barometer of where our team is, not necessarily Carlos's performances.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I do feel like Charles is one of the few on the grid that takes the fight to Max Verstappen, right? Like,
and is not afraid.
Right. When you look at Lando Norris, hey, let me step aside.
Gosh. Don't get me started on the ridiculous. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
See?
Well,
See?
I think George is the only person that's put a hole in a Red Bull in the recent past. So I feel like
Lewis did it. Lewis did it too. Remember last year? Yeah. But not on purpose. Yeah. Well, George didn't do it on purpose either.
Not on purpose. But so I feel like George would fight Max equally as Charles would. It's just, will he survive the fight? Because will he crash his car? I mean, I don't know.
I mean, absolutely. So, all right. It's actually a great segue into Mercedes and whatever. Hey, first of all, let me mention this. Phrase this question a little bit different. Is Mercedes on track to become the next Williams?
Oh my gosh! Holy moly! I felt that in my stomach. Nah, I don't.
Hey, no, I don't think. Right? Because what was Williams in the 90s?
In the
and late
90s, in the
80s. Yeah.
late 80s and 90s, Williams was the pinnacle of F1.
And where's Williams now?
They are still using the same programs that they were using in
They
the 90s to
literally
build
do
their
not
cars.
have enough chassis.
Yeah.
So with
They
Mercedes,
literally
I guess,
keep track of their parts with Microsoft Excel.
could you imagine?
Literally.
First of all, could you imagine you applied for a job at Williams and you got hired, and on your CV you put that Excel was like one of your skills? Because everybody lies, by the way, that says Excel, and then James Voss walks over to you and it's like, "Hey, mate, we're gonna have you handle this project, and it's super
You
important
got
that
this,
you get
right?
it done."
Because this is your thing. I mean, this is your thing, right? So perfect.
Doug, I would be like, James,
Excellent.
hey, hold this. I quit. I'm sorry. No,
Uh,
so with Mercedes, the downfall in their performance as of late, I'm gonna attribute it to a bunch of different things. One, they stuck with that. I know they hated that zero pod concept for too long. Two, they frankly don't understand the new regulate or the current regulations, right? And I don't know if anybody is willing to admit that. Mike Elliott was a great engineer, lost his job because of it. They brought in James Allison, vacationing from boats, to design the car,
yeah.
and now we have a finicky car. So this week, right, it comes out that James Allison is basically, it sounds like what he's attributing it to, the car's performance is basically the weather. When it's really cool, the car performs really well. When it's really hot, the car doesn't. And on top of that, they have Lewis running all of the experiments. So my question again is twofold. Are they done for the season? Is it too soon to call this Mercedes season a wash? Again, only 3 races in. The W15 was supposed to be a better car because this was a James Allison design, blah, 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 this, that, and the third. But they are 4th in the Constructors' Championship. They are losing people. Toto lies to our face every day when he says, you know, we're working
I'm mad
hard.
too.
Yeah, okay, sure you are. You can cry and wipe your tears with the $10,000 notes you have. Anyways,
exactly.
So yeah, are they a wrap? Like, what the heck is going on with Mercedes?
So I will say, Mercedes is a team that is not afraid of taking risks with the design of their cars.
Fair.
And they have shown in the past, I think the most powerful innovation they ever brought into F1 was the split turbo design. Mm-hmm. In 2014, they made an engine that was so fast, that it was so powerful, so it allowed them to run so much more wing than everybody else, and develop the car, the aero side of the car, without ever having to worry about the engine. What ended up happening was that even the feeder teams that they were giving engines to, they were performing well as well. Williams, for example. Williams got pole at Austria in 2014. Like, that's wild. Williams. So what ended up happening, I think, was Mercedes decided to roll the dice with a zero pod concept, and thinking, look, if we develop this further, we can really get somewhere with it. Just like we did in 2014 and other seasons with technological advances that we bring to the sport. And they innovated, they pioneered. The problem was that they didn't understand their car. And they didn't understand why it was quick. They couldn't get a handle on it. And then in 2024, they literally went back in time and said, let's start with a new platform from the bottom up, which is exactly what happened to everyone in F1 in 2022. And if you remember, in 2022, everybody was struggling to figure out how to optimize the car, and it took a couple seasons for teams to get into the window that they needed to be. So unfortunately, James Allison, who was also on leave because his wife died of cancer, I believe. Like, he needed some time off. He had delivered a 2016 car, I believe, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. He delivered a lot of championship winning cars. And because it was an evolution kind of a thing, they just built on their strengths. Whereas now they're starting from pretty much from zero and learning the quirks of the car. And you said something that was very interesting. Lewis is running all the experiments because his threshold is that vast that he can be running experiments with the car. You heard James Valls talk about it on a podcast this past winter.
Yeah, I know which one you're talking
where
about.
He said Lewis goes out there and just is experimenting during practice, and it's to the point where we're like, "Hey, we need a lap," and he's like, "Nah, I need to know things. I need to know what the car's doing here. I need to have these little data points in my mind." So it makes sense that he's doing that now. I love that perspective and that knowledge of a champion to be that way, who has that threshold where he can just experiment to his detriment, but it's
Yeah,
selfless because he's not going to reap the rewards really of this until maybe the end of this season, and then he's gone.
yeah, but
So you
you,
know,
no, you know what? No, you know what pisses me off about that? If George Russell is supposed to be the leader of the team,
no man, he's
why?
not.
No, no, no. Right? Why isn't he taking one for the team? Because hear me out. You're right. Leaps and bounds, the experience and the knowledge that Lewis has over Russell, it's not even close. I don't care
Yeah,
who you are. Like, just be for
yeah,
real.
yeah,
Because people like to say, like, Russell beat him in qualifying in 22, they tied in 23, and he's got a 3-0 advantage in 24. You don't score points for qualifying. I don't know why people like that's such
yeah.
a hard concept to grasp.
You
But
just ask Charles Leclerc.
my point here is that, like, if he's going to stick with the team after this season, right? Then shouldn't
Yeah.
he be the one who's giving like his input on it?
I think you make a point. I think the truth of the matter is George, when the car is working, will put it into the wall. So if and the thing is like if the car's working well and you're trying to pass Lando Norris in Singapore and he has DRS on purpose, like yeah, you should be doing more than crashing it into the wall. I don't think that George Russell. I want to talk about the accident a lot.
Oh,
Um,
we'll get there.
we'll
Don't
get
worry
there.
about
We'll
it.
get there. But I don't think that George has the capacity to be experimenting. He knows how to maximize what he has, but to be inventive and creative and bring the inputs that he really needs. George will give you inputs. Oh, the sun came out. Oh, I really want to pass Lewis. Can
Mm-hmm.
I go? Can I pit first and undercut him? Can Lewis move out of the way? Yeah, inventive, but not useful as a team builder. No, not at all. So, or maybe he's not there yet. So that's really kind of where I'm at.
That's fair. It feels like he's more interested in beating his teammate than actually scoring points and winning.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah, I guess the last one for you on Mercedes is like, how is this car somehow worse than its predecessors?
Because I think they started
Because
from scratch, and the
so they're basically in
scratch.
2022.
They're
Got you.
basically, I think, they're in 2022 mode, and they I think they're in a better place than they were in 2022. They're in more safe hands with
Sure,
James Allison
sure,
than they were with
sure.
Mike Elliott and all the other guys. But they're basically starting from scratch, and they not copied. I can't say that. They went with a different design than their hearts told them to go with. So they're
Fair.
having to maximize what they have.
That's fair. I guess for me, it's just kind of disappointing. I think really the most frustrating thing is, I guess I view it as kind of disrespect, and maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I think the approach that you're taking is better, in that you're saying let's use like Lewis's expertise to give us this valuable insight on the car to help us better the car. But instead, what I'm taking it as is like, Lewis is suffering. He's already struggling with the qualifying. You put him in experimental setups, so you don't really. He has no idea what his race pace is going to be by the time we get to qualifying, right? Then he qualifies P11, right? And now he's got to work his way back up. And meanwhile, you have George Russell. I don't know what Lewis is talking about. The car is great. It works. It's fine. I don't have any issues with it. And you know what? Hey, karma is
Bro,
so. No,
yo,
no, no. That's a good one. So, what did you think about talking about
he's
George Russell right now? What
yeah,
did you
George
think about
Russell.
Alonso's? I'm not gonna say brake check. Let's say took his foot off the pedal.
Off
No,
their
I don't
pedal,
know. It was
yeah. So first of all, there's a term that the British have, well, the youths in England have for people like George Russell. They call him beg friends. He's a beg friend. So just someone who's just always mooching and sucking up and
oh
you know getting what he's trying to get from everyone, and can I have this and can I have that. I will say I with the Alonso incident, I watched Julian Palmer's analysis of the accident, and Julian Palmer seemed to give me a different perspective. At first, I thought
Fair.
this is Alonso living in a gray zone that he
Mm-hmm.
has done his entire career. This is what makes him great. What part of the thing that makes him great? If you watch Max Verstappen at 2021 Sao Paulo, Max doesn't live in a gray zone. Max goes
Mm-mm.
way over the line and relies on the powers that be to avenge him after the race. I'm just going to leave it there. Um, he goes over the line by a lot. Fernando Alonso knows exactly where the line is. One of my favorite moments, I think it was last season, he's in the pits, coming out of the pits, and Lewis comes out. And Lewis is not even, I mean, it's not an unsafe release, but Fernando jolts the steering wheel. And he's like, hey, mate, it was an unsafe release. And it was just like in soccer when a player gets hit and you simulate. Fernando was simulating to because his brain works faster than
Fair.
any driver in F1 history. His brain works so fast. So they showed footage of Fernando doing something like this to to Lewis Hamilton last season, last race of the season in Abu Dhabi, and I know you were
Mm-hmm.
watching
Yep.
this strange thing where
He just
Alonso
brake
goes
checked me.
off,
Yep.
almost off the track, and Lewis follows him, which to me was bizarre. I was like, Lewis, just go. But then you realize what Fernando's doing was trying to give Lewis be ahead of him into the DRS,
Yep.
checkpoint, so
Yep.
he could get him in the following straight. And that's Fernando Alonso to a T. And so in this situation, how is it any different? Fernando definitely got off the power weight. He overdid it even for his standards.
Yeah.
I don't
Sure.
think he was like, I'm gonna see if I can get him into the wall. It was more like,
No.
how can I make this work for me and defend? Because we need the points. That's
Yeah.
Fernando Alonso to the T.
Yeah.
Now, George Russell has culpability in this accident. I'm sorry to say,
Okay.
he's looking at his steering wheel. He's turning some knobs coming into the corner. He looks up and it's too late. He instinctively
Fair.
overdoes it with the brakes, or not over the brakes. The gap gets too small. He wasn't paying
Mm-hmm.
attention necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
That's just was Julian's
Mm-hmm.
like overall view of it. And then he puts it into the wall. This is not the first time that in hand-to-hand combat George Russell crashes a
He
car.
said hand-to-hand combat. All right.
Hand-to-hand combat. I mean, the best example is not one with Mercedes, actually with Williams, with Valtteri at Imola. Same type of
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
situation.
yeah, yeah.
He's not paying it. He's new to the whole side because he's been racing with Williams, where his only rival is his teammate, and he was destroying Robert Kubica. So I don't know. Maybe he just is not that good at wheel-to-wheel combat. But the dude binned it into Valtteri, and they caused them to both crash out. And that accident was very expensive. It's not the first time George does this, and so I think he's fast. I just think that he needs to be more. I don't know what I'm trying to say specifically, but I think you know what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. So, all right. So you remind me of a couple of things. One, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the record. If this was Verstappen following Alonso, I don't know why he would be
Facts.
following Alonso, or if it was
Never.
Hamilton following Alonso.
Facts.
If it was,
Facts.
I'm gonna say somebody of his caliber. If it was Piastri following Alonso, is that going to happen? Are they going to crash? And especially
you can't
with
convince
Lewis.
me.
Yeah,
Lewis would have expected it. Lewis would have been like, I've raced against Fernando since 2007, since my rookie season. I know what this man will do.
I feel like Verstappen would have just taken him with him. Oh, okay, we're gonna brake check. Bet.
Mate, he brake checked me. Mate, he brake checked me.
No, we're going together. You brake check me. I'm driving because I feel like Verstappen, because I've literally heard him say this. He has more to lose than I do. So let's go. You and I to the bridge. But one thing that you reminded me of was, do you remember Canada last year? So it was Verstappen 1, Hamilton 2, Alonso 3. George Russell was behind Alonso. He's trying to follow the pace of those three and what those three are doing and bend it. You remember that? Yeah. So I completely forgot this is like the second time he's following Alonso and like this happens. So like the only thing, like, I feel like I don't have the quote exactly. I know Damon Hill says like we can't keep regulating. Like Alonso like didn't really do anything that was like
He overdid something that everyone does when they're trying to defend with their battery in the following straight is you break up the momentum of the driver behind you, and then you nullify the momentum so that you can have an even keel down the straight. And DRS is so powerful at Australia that he really needed to do something to give
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
himself a fighting chance. Did he overdo it? I don't even know if he overdid it. I know I said earlier he did. It You can say he did. You can say by the telemetry, yes, he was drastically slower than he was the previous
Sure,
laps.
sure.
But I can't say that that's something that drivers don't do to a slightly lesser extent. And is that margin enough to give him a 20-second
Yeah, that was a
time
little bit.
penalty?
That was a little bit
Look,
egregious.
Seb went off the track at Canada in 2018, something like that. Went off the track, came back on. Lewis couldn't. I mean, he couldn't shake Lewis, and Lewis won the race because they gave him a 5-second time penalty.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads on to something that we had been talking about, and that is these reactive penalties. These penalties based off of the carnage
Mm.
after the race or after the
Versus
incident
what
versus the
happened in the moment.
incident.
Yeah,
The
yeah.
exactly, and this happened to Lewis Hamilton at Silverstone 2021. If Max hadn't gone careening into the wall, if he had just gone off the track and then rejoined the track, I don't think they would have had the massive. He still defeated the penalty, which was Red Bull's like their biggest, the thing that angered them the most after the race. But these post incident penalties based off
Yep.
of the fallout
Yep.
versus the incident itself,
Yep.
and I think that one for sure is unfair to Fernando Alonso for sure.
I do feel like I don't know why, and this is completely off topic, but I'm not gonna dive into it. But something we should talk about at some point ever is the inconsistency in stewarding. Makes me think, why don't you all have a set team of
Yeah,
stewards so we have similar results? Anyways, okay,
yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
Alonso. Alonso. Anyways, so racecraft, he's crafty. He's 42, which is
He hasn't lost any of his
not even a
faculties.
little bit. Nope.
Fernando Alonso, Fernando Alonso, if Max Verstappen wasn't so freak alien like, we would still be talking about Fernando Alonso as one of, if not the best F1. That's a hot take, but one of the best drivers in the Formula One grid. Like at the very top, he just doesn't have the car. Like that would be the narrative
Well, he keeps trying to
because
find the car because how many teams has he been on? So you know what? Let me shut up. I don't want any
yeah,
Fernando
I think
fans in
the
my
hardest thing
mentions.
that
Yeah.
Fernando Alonso had to experience in F1 in the recent times was 2021 when he had to hold up Lewis Hamilton so that his teammate that's Fernando Alonso in his heart he's like gagging so that his teammate could have a chance to win the race because yeah, so Fernando Alonso thinks about Fernando Alonso and Fernando Alonso
First,
only.
yeah.
Yeah,
First,
first and
second, third,
foremost,
fourth. Yep,
and
yep.
yeah, and he is the wisest, craftiest driver I've ever seen in F1. He's so crafty. His threshold for just being able to process what's happening around him, his spatial awareness. Fernando Alonso used to be able to start races, and you'd see him just turning the steering wheel a little bit here and just to see what's happening around him. So agile, always landed on his feet, and so yeah, it's
All right.
crazy to me.
Well, I mean, I'm with you. I think this was more on George Russell. Oh boy.
Absolutely,
Anyways, uh,
yeah.
and I guess another team that I'm bringing up, completely random aside. I want to talk about V Carb, Toro Rosso, whatever that team is called. And hey, man, I think they got to stop disrespecting Yuki. So, Australia, it was a race where Yuki finished ahead of Ricardo, out qualified Ricardo. Previous race before that, Jeddah, same thing. And then the first race of the season where they had him swap spots and Ricardo couldn't do anything with it and didn't give the spot back, which is whatever. They were on different strategies. Sure. Why is Yuki Tsunoda, in spite of his solid performance and the people that they put in front of him, whether it's De Vries, whether it's Lawson, whether it's Ricardo, he
Yeah.
continues to outshine it. And don't get me wrong, like I don't feel like Yuki is ready to be in Red Bull. I honestly feel like a move to Aston Martin once Honda becomes their engine supplier makes more sense to me. Yeah, but why are they?
Um,
doing
So
Yuki like that.
so when Yuki Tsunoda comes into F1 and really does a decent job, I can't fault him. Does he have that dude from the Hangover gene where he's volatile? Yes, he is volatile. And yes, the guy used to cuss so much on the radio. The teams were like, guys, hey, bro, can you slow down with that? But they did the right thing. I forget the name of the team principal at Toro Rosso who was there for years.
Oh, Franz.
Franz Tost.
Hmm.
Franz Tost made him move to Italy, where the team is, changed his diet, did things to rehabilitate him and put him in a place where he needed to be, and I think he's responded to that. He, I don't think he's spectacular, but he's going to. I think he's doing good enough with what he has, and he's been very consistent,
Fair,
very
fair, fair,
consistent.
fair.
So yeah,
So
I think that's
I
why.
mean,
I think
okay,
that's
but
why
that to me,
Japanese drivers. I think that's why he's had some trouble with the respect.
I think that for me the bigger issue is that he needs to be not on that team. Okay,
Hmm.
so hear me out. With Red Bull, that's not. It's not happening. He's not. I don't think there's ever a position where they're going to put him in seat number 2 for Red Bull, because when I look at him and I look at Checo, negligible difference, right?
Yeah,
That's what I'm
negligible.
saying.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
I think he's better than his current teammate, right, Ricardo. Uh,
yeah.
and I really feel like a move away from Red Bull and going into, again, I'm saying Aston Martin might be a good spot for him to land. Especially with Honda coming in. I thought he did well this race. He's performed decent, but I think I hear what you're saying. I kind of agree. It's not anything that's going to be like awe inspiring, and I don't feel like he's gonna win, the World Drivers Championship anytime soon. But I guess, like, La Yuquita, he's gonna do well at some point. But I guess secondary question to that: does that mean that is his teammate washed? Or is it Yuki that much better than him, or is it just Daniel? Because what Ricardo is saying is, you know, I'm not comfortable with the car. I believe in myself. I'm not listening to the detractors. Um, but is it time
let's
for Danny Rick to
yeah.
hang it up?
I want to first talk about Danny Rick's strength. The thing that makes Danny Ricciardo, historically in F1, is his ability to be late on the brakes and know what the car's doing into corner entry enough that he can be very aggressive with the braking of the car.
Mm-mm-mm-mm.
A great example of Danny Ricciardo just living in a flow state with the brakes is 2014 Monza. He fakes an outside move on Seb into De La Roggia and then goes in all in one, like, just he fakes the out, dekes in, kind of like this is gonna be such a niche example, but like Pavel Datsuk, hockey player for the Detroit Red Wings, had a famous juke that he would do in faceoffs with goalies that they would end up almost leaving the rink. This is what happened. It happened just the same, and seeing that, and knowing what his strength is, seeing how McLaren has just eroded him as a human
Sure.
being.
The confidence. Yep.
Yeah, hearing Christian Horner, who at this point I don't know who I loathe more, Christian Horner or the Emperor
Doctor
Palpatine.
Muerte. Yeah.
Yeah,
Nope.
Doctor Muerte. Hearing him say he developed so many horrible things in his driving, he just developed these weird habits and terrible habits, and I don't know what happened to him at the other teams, but he was just not the driver, the Daniel that we know. Bro, shut up. Number one. Second, like, maybe that's true, um, but Daniel is missing mojo. He's
Sure.
missing the
Sure. Sure.
sauce. And there were questions about the ethics of VCarb, because couldn't they just build a Red Bull, not call it that,
Yeah.
and kind of, go up in the rankings a little bit? And I don't know.
I thought that's what
I
they were gonna
gotta,
do. Yeah,
yeah, and I gotta give it to them. It doesn't look like they've done that.
not even a little
So
bit.
not even a little bit. So um, Danny, is his confidence gone in F1? Will he get it back? Is he just smiling because he can't
Oh,
fathom not being in F1?
so you're saying it's
I
like a
don't.
state of the dial smile through the sadness?
Yeah, man, because it's hard to see him. I I don't want to see Daniel Ricciardo in a grid where he isn't in front of the cameras. If you race in WEC, you're not really gonna be a lot in front of the camera because you're
Nah.
sharing a car with two other drivers. So like,
Yep.
you're not really the centerpiece of your car. You're sharing a car with other people. I don't want to see him somewhere where he's not the centerpiece because of his vibes. I hate to sound like a Gen Z or whatever, but like
I get it. No, I get it.
it's
He looks like a
it's the
fun guy to
truth.
be around. I understand.
He
Yeah,
looks like a fun guy to be around, and when it's not going well for him, it hurts to see the smile
sadness,
in spite of the
sadness.
sadness.
Yeah,
It
yeah.
hurts. So I hope that he gets it together just to relive the days of his brilliance, the days when the shoey was instituted, when he would drink champagne out of the shoe. Like those were some great times. He was giant killing Mercedes, and it felt good. It felt right, and I ever since Baku 2017, I just I don't know, or 2018 when him and Max came together into the first turn,
Mm-mm.
it hurt to see him drive a little bit. He was a
All
little
right.
shaken. So,
So hopefully,
yeah.
then I guess the season pans out better. He's on a 1 year contract, but what I'm seeing from him right now doesn't make me or give me the confidence to think that he is going to replace anybody, but rather he might be replaced by Lee. And maybe they should replace. Anyways, all right. So we are coming to the end of our time because I could literally talk to you about a bunch of stuff, but I think you got people knocking down your door to
Yeah,
come spend some time with you.
literally.
So now is the part of the podcast that I started last week. And I said we're going to bring culture to this podcast. And we are. We're teaching you some Dominicanisms. Now, Didier is very familiar with Dominicanisms because he's hung around with a lot of Dominicans. So,
Yeah.
Didier, who is your pariguayo for the Australian GP and who is your matatan for the Australian GP?
I want to say my pariguayo for this race was definitely George Russell. Um, you had a chance to really bring points home. Yes, what happened to you in front of you was not great, but other drivers have dealt with it better, namely your teammate. Got brake checked at Saudi Arabia, which, to be fair, he crashed into Max Verstappen because of Max Verstappen brake checking him. But he finished the race and he won the race, and he actually went faster after the accident with less
I'm
parts
not
on his
saying, but I'm
car.
saying. Yep.
Not the same. But then and then again in Baku, I mean Abu Dhabi last season, the brake check, the moving off the track, and Lewis follows him like, oh, no, dog, after you. I think George could have been much more aware of what was going on around him. Did the culpability lie on Fernando Alonso? Yes. Could it have been avoided? Absolutely, if you had been paying
1,000%.
attention.
Sure. Sure.
So I think that's my parihuayo for the race.
Your matatan?
That is an even better question. My matatan is actually going to be. Actually, I'm going to split it. Yes, I should say Carlos Sainz, but I'm not. I'm going to say Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hulkenberg because
Haas. Okay.
what they're doing at Haas has given them a car that is it's stable, it has good race pace, and they're not only maximizing that race pace, but they're working together. Bleep moment, folks. Suck my balls, mate. If anybody remembers that moment, this is Kevin Magnussen replying to Nico Hulkenberg, who questions his ethics in defending
Yeah.
post race, and Kevin Magnussen looks at him and says, "Suck my balls, mate." For
Yeah.
those two guys to get over their beef, and there was
They're doing the
beef,
most.
to get
Shouts
over
out.
their beef and fight for each other, and then was it ninth and 10th? I
Yep.
respect that. I
Yep.
like that. I like what Haas is doing post Gantasteiner.
Yeah, it was time for him to go. All right, I respect that. Hey, some much needed and rare W's for Haas.
Yes.
For me, my Pariguayo actually is not a race car driver. My Pariguayo is Air Wolf. All right, I can't for various reasons. It's hard for me to say his name, his first name, his nickname
Yeah.
actually.
For
But
very obvious reasons.
for very so obvious reasons.
Such obvious
He
reasons.
he is my Pariguayo because he can dog either buy a new simulator, throw the whole thing away, or just say we suck, whatever. But we can, we're just working really hard and we feel like we've unlocked. What was it that he said before the Australian Grand Prix? We're going to
Oh
bring
man.
100% maximum effort and guarantee that whatever it was. Again, another podcast that I was watching was like, when Toto Wolff opens his mouth, I just stopped listening. So Pariguayo, not even a race car driver. It's legitimately Wolf. All right. He
Wolf.
needs to just take the role and be the Zach Brown and get a real TP in there to
Yeah.
and Wolf, he could just show up at tracks and cheer and be all of that. Yeah.
If you close your eyes and he speaks and Arnold Schwarzenegger speak in his prime, it's the same person. Okay.
Follow me.
Yeah.
Anyways, all right. And
Yeah.
then I'll give the obvious Matatan for me is going to be Carlos Sainz.
Yeah.
Right. Week in and week out, I think because of his teammate and just more exciting person to watch in Charles Leclerc, I think Carlos Sainz, I'm not gonna say he gets disrespected. He's just one of those things where it's like, oh, he's there, but he's the last two victories for Ferrari have been Sainz. There is a lot to say of the fact that he got his appendix removed. Right. Granted, it's a surgery that the recovery time is roughly 2 weeks, but
he weighs less.
But shouts out to Sainz, and honestly, he said it best. It'll look good on the CV, so definitely a lot of teams will be paying attention to him, and who knows where he will end up this year. I'm taking the very obvious Matatan, and one of the few people on the grid who would understand the words but might not understand the phrase since he speaks Spanish. But yeah, that's gonna bring it in to a close. Thank you, Didier, for being my first and hopefully not the last guest I have on here. I'm gonna have you on more times, so be prepared. Hopefully, with more of notice. I appreciate you coming in. Any last words before I do my sign off?
Actually, yes. My honorable mention for Matatan, believe it or not, I know. I heard you say it. I was like, dang, I should have done that. My honorable mention for Matatan, actually, Charles Leclerc. Why? Horrible first stint. But on the last stint, Lando Norris on better tires, and Charles not only kept the gap, but actually increased it, and I think he got fastest lap. When the car works, Charles is fast. And he defended against a car that had way newer tires on a different strategy, and Lando gave it everything. I know he did. So shout out to Charles for not actually getting past and actually keeping the gap and doing wonderful to come second and bring it home 1-2.
All right. So co Matatan. All right.
Yeah.
Well, that is going to be it for the podcast. As always, like, comment, subscribe, leave anything. Follow me on all my socials. Follow Didier on the social that he has. Tell your mommies, your papis, your tios, your tias, abuelos, abuelas for the F1 or the Monoplaza F1 podcast. This is your host, Emi Beltre. Peace.